Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. We're glad you're tuning into this episode. We are a viewer and listener supported podcast, so we really appreciate you listening, watching on YouTube. We really encourage you to subscribe to whatever platform you're using. If you're on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, or if you're on Apple or however you listen to a podcast, be sure and subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. Also, make comments if you like it and share it if you like it. We really need people to make comments and share the episodes that you like. And then also, if you're not already a supporter, we really would encourage you to go to spiritualityadventures.com and you can pick a tier, and we have bonus content for every type of giver. This is a nonprofit, so they're tax-deductible donations, but we do provide bonus content for those who are supporters. So be a part of the team, help support Spirituality Adventures, and we're so glad you're tuning into this episode. Hey, welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. Glad you're tuning in this time. Today, I've got Dr. Nicole Price with us on the podcast. Thank you, Nicole, for tuning in and for being a part of us as a guest.
My pleasure.
So Nicole is an empathy, trying to spark an empathy revolution in the workplace across America. All right. And her new book that just came out last year is called Spark the Heart, Engineering Empathy in Your Organization. And it's a great book. I enjoyed reading it. Forbes put it out, which is cool. And I had Don Hall and Adam Hamilton wrote a couple of great local endorsements for the book. So give us a little bit of your story. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? Tell us a little bit about your family background. And and then move us from there into how you got into this empathy revolution.
So I was raised in Kansas City. Both my parents are from a county called Coahoma County, Mississippi. They met there. And then my dad's family moved to Kansas City and my mom followed because they got married really young. And I am the sixth child of 7 children born to that marriage. Why'd you make that face? He's like, whoa.
6. My friend Matt here has 7 kids.
Oh, okay.
And he just turned 36.
Yeah.
All right.
Let me see. So that's the same as my mom. At least my mom would have been 30 when she had me and 37 when she had my little sister.
Wow.
And she was the last one.
See, those women need special special awards of some sort. Anyway,
I don't know how. Wow. I have one child, but I've always been kind of running to the beat of my own drum. But I often tell people that I don't remember when I wasn't Christian. I was born into the faith. When I decided that I was going to give my life to Christ, it was really just a formality. I had, you're supposed to go up there and get baptized, but I was already a little Bible thumper from the beginning. So I don't have a story of conversion, which, sometimes I'm kind of jealous of because it just seems nice to be able to have a story of conversion, but I don't have a story of conversion.
But from as young as you can remember, you were in love with God and Jesus.
I don't remember when I did it.
What church did you grow up in?
Bethel Missionary Baptist Church. It's on 18th Street, about 2 miles east of the 18th and Vine District. My pastor was Reverend Jimmy Woods Sr.
Okay.
And that's where I got my first speaking engagement opportunities. I was the champion for the extemporaneous Bible speaking competitions and learning all the Bible verses. I mean, that was my life. In school, I was an exceptional student. And because of that, was kind of pushed towards science and math. And didn't know any different. So I studied chemical engineering in undergraduate school. And interestingly enough, Hallmark recruited me to come back home because I went to school in North Carolina.
Did you go? You went to college?
I went to college in North Carolina.
Which college?
North Carolina A&T. It's a historically Black college and university with a really strong engineering program. So went there because I had a full scholarship, and then Hallmark recruited me back here. I worked in engineering for Hallmark for about a decade. People often ask, what do engineers do at Hallmark?
Right.
They typically don't know that they make their own glue, their own fixtures, their own cards, plates, cups, napkins. So all the ink that's associated with that, paper, what kind of humidity and things like that you need. Those were my kinds of projects. And one day I was leading engineers and technical professionals, and I had been given a coach to help me just be more effective with people. And I did everything she said, and my team was happier, but I was all of a sudden not happy. And I was like, I love engineering, but my personality completely disagrees. It's almost why I don't even like telling people I'm an engineer. Because I don't really act like an engineer in any way, So I started actually teaching operations and IT professionals how to be better leaders. And that's how I transitioned into more of this professional development stuff. And so I'll fast forward 10 years. And in 2016, I started my own leadership development firm. And we specialize in helping leaders be better at what they do. That's it.
What is that called? Is that still going today? What's the name of it?
Lively Paradox.
Okay. So if you go to livelyparadox.com, you'll find it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when I got the call from Forbes about a book I wanted to write, I had already written 5 books. And they were like, well, we would love to help you with something. I said, well, what y'all need to do is find somebody to write a book about empathy that's not about holding hands and singing Kumbaya, something that people can actually implement. And also not academic. And they're like, well, you should do it. And I was like, no way. So then I talked to Adam.
Yeah.
Because many people had been saying that to me, that I should write the book. I'm like, I'm the least empathetic person on the planet. I should not be the one writing this book. And Adam laughed at me in his office out in Leawood.
Yeah.
He's like, you're the perfect person because you don't have it naturally. You're probably better able to teach it to people. And I was like, I was expecting him to say something different. But I had written the entire book. And now that you've read it, you might notice this. I write the introduction last. And I don't know why I do it that way. It's just easier for me to write a compelling introduction after I finish the book. How do I introduce you to something I don't know? So I write the product first, and then I introduce you to it. And it was just an academic exercise. I was just explaining all the times that I'd screwed up empathy and what I'd learned from studying leadership and development and what should be done instead. And I've got my whole process for how you teach other people empathy. But right after I finished the whole book, but did not have the introduction, I found out through Ancestry that I am not Louis Price's biological daughter. So I'm the 6th child of 7, and I have a different dad. It came to me through Ancestry, even though I had been on Ancestry for 10 years. There was nothing standing out, obviously, to tell me that I had a different family. And one of my nieces had asked me to connect with her through Ancestry, and I couldn't add her as my niece. So that's how this started. And I was so angry that I could barely think straight, but that was necessary. And it was necessary because to experience effective or emotional empathy, you probably should understand the range of human emotion. And I didn't really understand the range of human emotion. I had a couple of emotions: fine, fantastic, and blessed. Those were my emotions. None of those are emotions.
Was that all you were allowed
Pretty
to feel?
Pretty much.
Okay.
And but I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And so through that process, I got introduced to a body of work by Dr. Mark Brackett. Now I will not forget his name. He wrote a book called Permission to Feel.
I've got it. I've tried to interview him, but I hadn't connected yet. But yeah.
I love his work and how he talks about it.
Yeah.
And it was just what I needed to be able to open the book in a way that I think is important. So I dedicated the intro to my mother. And just talking about how much compassionate empathy she had and how that showed up and how I did not have it because I felt like she was being used. But it was important for me to have that experience when I had it, because now I feel more credible to talk about empathy.
Yeah. So this, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I was going to ask you, you start the book off telling the story about your mother being hit and killed by a drunk driver.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Did you find out about your biological dad, or that your dad, how did that, was that before your mother died?
Oh, no, my mom died in 2011. So I just found out about this biological discovery, this DNA discovery in 22. So my mother had been dead for years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah. In fact, both my parents were dead, but my biological father is still alive.
Have you met him?
Oh, yeah. And I look just like him.
Isn't that wild? Mm-hmm. Where does he live?
He's South Kansas City.
Oh, my gosh.
About 20 minutes away from me.
So you literally have just met him in the last...
2 years, yeah.
Gee.
It hasn't even been 2 years just yet.
It was, oh my gosh. I could dive down that, Robert.
But I got to tell you, you'll understand this, I think, because of what I think. I know a little bit about your story. But when my mom died, I knew, it's a celebration, right? You can't even be sad. Have you noticed funerals have switched to these things where
celebration of life.
This is a celebration of life.
Right.
Why are you sad? This person's gonna go. Mm-hmm. Listen, I'm telling you this, Pastor. If when I die, you're not falling out and crying and mourning because you're sad, I'm leaving. I'm coming back and hunting you. Okay.
All right.
You better fall. Take me now, Lord. I want you to fall in the casket. Like, give me all the drama. No, but I noticed that I was just pushing down everything that I was feeling, just pushing it down. And I know now I was able to still intellectualize myself out of that grief, interestingly enough. But the grief I felt from losing my identity, from being Louis Price's favorite child, at least that's what I thought, that grief, I finally met something my mind couldn't work me out of.
Wow.
So I had to get in touch with my body, get in touch with my feelings. Ugh. And my heart broke wide open, right? And those are the kinds of things that I think make me credible enough to be able to talk to other people about empathy. Because before I just wasn't. It was all academics. It was things I had studied, things I'd even done professionally, but I didn't know it until this.
One of my friends in the meditation world just sent me a little video. She said, I thought of you, overthinking is underfeeling. The title of the video. I was like, whoa, okay.
I resemble that comment.
Yeah, me too.
Because I can usually convince myself I'm fine. Yeah. I'm fantastic. I'm blessed. But it was not working when I found out my dad wasn't my dad. In fact, my hair fell out. I couldn't focus, couldn't sleep, and I sleep well. But I needed to meet Mark Brackett. I needed to,
Very cool. How about, you start off with the story of your mother being killed by a drunk driver. And that obviously sparked in you a deep empathy, but kind of in a weird roundabout way, wouldn't you say? Like, because it took 5 years to prosecute the person.
Oh yeah, almost 5 years. So I guess there's a standard practice that when your client is probably guilty of a crime, that you first try to see if there's some mental health issue there. So you stall a little bit. Probably guilty of a crime, and there's a lot of public sentiment around it. You want that public sentiment around it to die down if you're the defense attorney. You don't want hundreds of people showing up at the courtroom, sprawl all out into the hallway, which is what was happening in the very first few months of this, because my mom was just fed people. When you feed people, lots of folks. Mm-hmm. So we probably wasted a year on mental health assessments, and to make sure that they weren't, if they could claim temporary insanity, then they probably would have, or something like that. So that took a while, and then The results came back no, and so then defense attorney says, "Oh, we want to do it with someone else, so you get 2 times." So that stalls you another year or so. It was a very interesting process.
And how did that impact your empathy revolution ideas?
Going through the murder trial?
Yeah.
I think not in ways people think. So the longer I sat in court listening to his story, but this was cognitive empathy. This was not effective empathy at the time. I always like to be super clear about that with people because they're like, "Oh, was the death of your mother how you built empathy?" Yes, but not in the way people think. Because when people think about empathy, they usually think feeling with another person. But that didn't happen until 22, I think. But cognitive empathy, I'm sitting there and I'm listening to this guy's life. And I'm like, good Lord, if all these things had happened to me, I'd probably be on drugs too. I'd probably be drinking, I'd probably be trying to numb myself. He'd just been failed so much by the system. His parents didn't want him, so he ended up in foster care. Then he couldn't be with his grandmother because she had health conditions. And then every time he was using substances and maybe shouldn't have been, he ended up being put in jail, not rehab. And so then in jail, he's getting abused. It was just like situation after situation after situation. And the day he killed my mother, his grandmother had just died. So he was high and drunk when he stole a car and then was speeding and ran into her. Yeah. But as you're listening to that, I don't know about anybody else, but I can't listen to that and not care about that. Like that matters. And if for no other reason, it would have mattered to my mother. And how do you give a victim impact statement about, my mom's name was Gertrude Price. How do you give a victim impact statement about the life of Sister Gertrude Price if you don't mention empathy? It's hypocritical. And so when it was time for me to talk about the impact to our family, I spent no time talking about what he had taken from us. I just talked about her life and who she helped. Wow. And it became patently clear that she would have been helping him. And so in that, the judge did take that into consideration and reduced, he was probably going to get life in prison. Because after he hit my mother, he had like 9 counts. So after he hit my mother, instead of helping her, he takes off running. So he's like fleeing the scene of the crime. I mean, it's like so many things. So he's facing life in prison without the possibility of parole. But the judge, I cannot remember her name, but she told me that she's going to take my victim impact statement into consideration. And he got 15 years. So he should be getting out if he's had good behavior, like within the next year. But if no good behavior, he's got 2 years left.
So it drew you into... I mean, by the end of that 5 years, you had some type of empathy for this person who killed your mother, basically. Yeah. It was mental empathy, right? Like going, if it were me, what would I want to happen? And people think that these different types of empathy are just all the same and it's just semantics, but emotional empathy comes from a different side of the brain than the mental empathy. My ability to feel with you is a different center of the brain than me listening to you, recognizing I'm completely separate from you, and just trying to understand what's happening to you. I think engineering probably helped me with that too, a bit. Right? Like a bit of objectivity and distance that you can put between.
I basically took an objective approach and said, what would I do if this weren't my mother? Which, through Mark Brackett's work around permission to feel, I was suppressing too in that. You see it?
Yeah.
It's like, let me take an objective view as if this isn't my mother. It is my mom. It is my mom. And I didn't know I was doing that at the time, but that's absolutely what I was doing.
I mean, when you were describing the person who killed your mother, just as you went through that, and then talking about how your mother would have been one that cared for this person if they had ever crossed paths that way. I felt emotion I almost got tears in my eyes.
Yeah.
Like, so that's a type of empathy, I guess.
Yeah, it's
right?
it's called affective or emotional empathy. And many people who are in the caring profession have it naturally. It's what drives you to go to caring professions like teacher, or doctor, or nurse, probably more than doctor.
Or pastor.
Pastor, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's not bad, but it has capacity limitations. You cannot take on, if people are feeling great, it's wonderful.
Yeah, right.
But people are complicated, and people don't always just feel great. And so over the course of a day or week or months, if you keep taking on these negative emotions, you start to, when your goal at first might be to help others, there's only but so much pain before your goal starts to be like, I got to relieve the pain. And that's how burnout happens, and that's how people need sabbaticals and those things. So I spend a decent amount of my time teaching people and helping professionals and helping professions how to not get rid of emotional empathy, because that, I mean, we need that. But how to use cognitive empathy as well, because there's almost a limitless capacity you have to think about what somebody, recognizing, hey, that's not me, it's not my situation, and what can I do to help based on my level of understanding. You could do that ad nauseum without getting tired.
Okay. Interesting.
So when people are struggling with burnout, that's one of my practices I try to teach them.
So let's dive into the corporate world a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because I think a lot of this book, it seemed to me like you're kind of angling it toward the corporate world.
That's what I know.
Right.
You know, so that's who most of my clients are. Even when they're churches, they're usually massive.
Big churches.
Yes, like Church of the Resurrection is a client. I mean, they got a whole staff, right? So they operate kind of like a business.
Yeah, I had
you had that too. Yeah, and then like school systems, large school systems operate like businesses too in some ways. So so organizations.
So I was fascinating. You started out with Patrick, is it Lencioni, and his sort of like, like if you think about like Jack Welch, who was the cutthroat, results only.
Fire the bottom 10% every year.
Exactly. And but then Patrick's deal is like he has this pyramid, which you lay a foundation of trust. You deal with conflict in a healthy way. You build strong commitment through that trust and through healthy conflict resolution.
Then you can hold people accountable.
Then you begin to move into accountability. Then you begin to pay attention to results. So there's this, it's like this.
It's a process.
Yeah. So, but I think like your Jack Welch type people, because I've heard him, I mean, he's just like, fire him. Like, he's like, Trump on Apprentice. Fire him, fire him,
You're fired.
You're fired.
You know what's interesting is whenever I talk to organizations about empathy, a question I can always tell you I'm going to get is, well, how do we hold these people accountable? The thinking is, if I'm empathetic, then there's no way people are going to do their jobs. Right. And there's two challenges with that. One is our definition of empathy. Understanding somebody better, does that make you less able to hold them accountable to their objectives? I would argue no, probably helps you. And then two, I'm talking to you about empathy, and the first group of people you think about are your low performers. I would argue that we probably could stand to be more empathetic to everybody. And if you don't trust it, maybe try it with the ones you like the most. I don't know. But people always go to edge case, the people they probably should have already had conversations about separation agreements well before I showed up. But it's interesting that people think that empathy is actually a weakness. And what I love about Lencioni's work, so it was The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team was one of the first leadership books I was given after Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. It's like, here, this Lencioni guy is wonderful.
What's the chapter that Covey has about empathy? I forgot the title of it. He calls it something different, but he gives that illustration about like a dad who's not disciplining his kids on a bus ride, and the kids are like making the bus ride uncomfortable for everybody, and everybody's judging him for not being a good parent. And then he ended up having a conversation with the dude, and his wife had just died.
Wife had died. Yeah.
I can't. I think it's his chapter on understand before. I can't remember how he titled
we'll have to
it.
look
it's one
up,
of the seven.
We'll look up the seven habits, because I like Stephen M. R. Covey, his son too. I don't know if you've seen any of his work.
Yeah.
He wrote a book about trust. It's like the speed of trust, but there's like 17 different things related to trust that are just like, it's a lot to remember.
I mean, it's kind of that basic, people don't care how much you know till they know how much you care kind of idea, and that matters even in the corporate work world. If you're trying to build good teams to do great results, how do you build that?
How do you do that? And that's why I'm excited about this TED Talk, because sharing that pimps are empathetic.
Yeah, I'm going to have to listen to this.
Because what's the working definition of empathy? Understanding what other people feel or think or believe. Having an understanding of that. Pimps are exceptional at understanding that. And so, we'll have to see. But the reason I'm excited about it is because some of the world's most nefarious characters have used empathy to manipulate.
Right.
What if I could get well-meaning people to dig into the tactical components of cognitive empathy to mobilize people for good? Instead of, what we do instead is, I just don't understand how anybody could. If you ever say, I just don't understand how anybody could, you are so far from being empathetic to that person or group. And let's talk about how we could figure out how anybody would do whatever this thing is you want to know.
I mean, like, take The Godfather.
Oh, yeah.
This manipulative, cunning person who could kill you or love you.
Or love you.
Depending on how you behave.
And think about what he had to understand about people, though, to know who he was going to trust, who he wasn't.
Yeah.
But it's habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
There we go.
Yes, that one.
Yeah.
Habit 5. Yeah. So I'd grown up at Hallmark. People from around here understand Hallmark to be very much, at least the brand, is very much emotional connectedness. So for better or worse, my corporate beginnings were in a place where people were working on trust, that leaders did have to learn how to be emotionally intelligent. If you weren't, you were going to be sent to a class to learn how to be better to your people. So when I got out into the consulting world, that was the bias I had. I assumed everyone who was a leader would have had that basic foundation of Stephen Covey, the Patrick Lencioni's, the Susan Scotts, like, this stuff. Like, So if you can imagine my horror when I went into a manufacturing plant and they're like, we're doing everything you told us to do, and the people are about to have a union walkout. And so when I did a manufacturing walkthrough, I saw warehouses where it's blistering hot and people don't have water. If they want water, they have to pay for it. Just some basic kind of...
In the parking scenario you went over. No place to park, and then they're late, and then
Yeah. So, and then you
punish the gal that needs the money, but her car gets towed.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh. And there's all this other stuff about that same lady that, her mother had just died a couple weeks. It was just awful. But Patrick Lencioni's pyramid was wonderful, because I was like, hey, you guys are up here at the accountability level, because that's what they told me they needed. I assumed trust was there, healthy conflict was there, and that they had everybody's commitment. I thought that was kind of basic. No. No. So we back up and we go, let's talk about how do we set a foundation of trust? And you can't really do that if you don't have empathy,
right.
I don't think.
And I'm kind of, because I want to, I could talk for hours about this stuff, but Brene Brown's work on vulnerability and leadership, she's tried to lead maybe a vulnerability revolution in the corporate workplace world, and how I think that has to play into those are almost the same coin, but maybe the flips. Because to me, empathy and vulnerability
It's like all of these
both are important
virtuous concepts that go together if you want them to. They don't necessarily have to.
Tell me how you would differentiate between the impact of vulnerability versus the impact of empathy. How do they play together and how are they different? So that was one of the things I thought about as I was reading through this, because I've read so much on the vulnerability side of things.
So let me just share first how you could be empathetic without being vulnerable.
Okay.
Vulnerability requires me to be seen. I have to open up and let you see me too. But empathy is other directed. So prior to my DNA discovery, I was absolutely other directed. It was, let me understand you. Anytime you ask me anything about me, I'm going to give you the surface level stuff that you could probably Google and find. I didn't let people into my world in any way. I wasn't going to share with you my feelings of if I felt fear or if I felt scared. No way. I was just doing the exercises that they taught me in HR. I wasn't internalizing the exercises they taught me in HR. Does that differentiation make sense? And what I love about Dr. Brown is that she shares that most of the organizations she talked to, they're like, can you come in and teach all of this, but leave that vulnerability thing out? Like, people want to cover. But when you suppress feelings, they come out, but in ugly ways. Ugly ways. So what does that look like? Is it avoidance? Is it overly competitiveness? Is it silos? Is it back channeling politics? What is it? But it's going to come out.
It's a passive aggressive dynamic and how it plays out, right? So what are you went through about 10 myths of empathy.
Oh, yeah.
Which one, if you, instead of going through all 10, what do you see as probably the biggest 2 or 3 that mess companies up and leadership cultures up? The myth of empathy.
Yeah, people think that empathy
hurts a culture, hurts a company.
People think that empathy is being nice or kind. Now, I feel like I'm a kind person. I think that it's important to be kind, but empathy is different from being kind. And if I am working with people who are incredibly kind, but still don't understand their employees, so you're just going to be nice to me when you tell me you're going to take my water away from the... You can tell me in the most kind way possible you're not going to have water for me in the warehouse. You don't have to be mean to do something that...
You can be so nice about it, you can walk away going, oh, okay, I get it. I don't have water.
They have money to... We have a vending machine for them. And then I'm going to be real nice when I introduce the policy that says if you park in the visitor spot, your car is going to get towed, even though we know that there are not enough parking spots. I don't have to be mean when I say that. I don't have to lack kindness, or I can be courteous when I say those things. And because people conflate niceness and kindness with empathy, sometimes they misunderstand when something doesn't look like it's nice, but it's empathetic. Now, I'll use my mom as an example. Mother absolutely hated to be hugged. She was not coming to your birthday party. But if you needed money for rent, she's going to give it to you. If you needed food, she's going to make sure you had it. If she needed to mobilize some folks to get you out of jail, she was going to do it. Now, which one do you want? You want the person smiling at you and showing up at your birthday party, or the one who's going to feed you when you...
All right.
I mean, how many people in our churches have stories about maybe tithing for years, and then they get in a bad spot, and then they ask the church to help them, and they're like, no, we don't do that. Or just charity that is almost looking down on people instead of being with people. I think empathy is the differentiator. It's like a hammer that is neutral until you put it in your hand and decide if you're breaking things or building things. And that's what I kind of want people to kind of get their heads around. That I was just talking to a friend on Sunday, and she gave me some wonderful advice for my TED Talk, which was I need to smile. Now, my first reaction was, did you really, during Women's History Month, tell me that I need to smile? But my second reaction was, she's right. If I don't smile, even though the content is really heavy, it's going to be distracting for people for whatever biased reasons they have around why I should be smiling on the stage. She's right. But when she was telling me, she said, you just don't sound like empathy. And I know exactly what she means. Empathy is warm and soft and nice and kind in her mind. But that is not what it is by definition. I would argue that if you go back through historical figures who have been responsible for genocides, who have been responsible for massive destruction, their ability to convince people of things because they understood the emotions they were feeling is like way more than the average person.
They can tap into an underlying anger and frustration with systems, and then now they're the fixers. It's how people join gangs. It's how people join organizations that their mission is to hate certain groups. And so if there's anything I'm trying to do with this revolution is to get well-meaning people to understand that there are folks mobilizing, but they're mobilizing because they have bad reasons. How can we mobilize to bring people together for good reasons? And may I just share kind of just a subtle way this thing happens? Sure.
It's Chiefs in the Super Bowl, right? Where everybody's going to watch the game. It's Super Bowl Sunday. I would venture to say half the preachers I know were like, if you love Jesus as much as you love the Chiefs, your life would be better. Well, based on what I think, feel, and believe, that's accurate. But if you're trying to tap into what other people think, feel, and believe, you haven't flexed your empathy muscle at all. Not in any way. Flexing your empathy muscle goes, what do people want? What do they care about? And what am I trying to get them to understand about Jesus? And how do I get that message to them in a way that works? If you want to, you might not want to, because there are people who feel like, no, you get it the way I give it to you. And I'm like, different crowd than maybe would be interested in what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So you deal with these like corporate managers, corporate CEOs. They need to show profits so that their stockholders make money. And so they're focused on bottom line. They're focused on results. Many times, and you're trying to help them understand that actually if you develop empathy and trust and some social bonding skills, emotional intelligence skills, that base of empathy can actually, in the long run, propel even better results. But in their minds, they're thinking, well, if you get soft on people, then you can't hold them to any kind of standard.
And let's be clear, I don't tell them anything because you can't tell these people things. So I'm gonna share my strategy, because just in case somebody's listening needs to do the same in their organization, because I'm but one person, so I need more people doing this. What I do is I ask leaders to write down, tell me first who is their favorite leader. It doesn't matter if they're real or imagined. If Batman's your favorite leader, I'm not arguing. It can be somebody personal or professional. So if it's your dad or your Uncle Bobby, fine by me. Just got to pick one person. And then I want them to write down 10 characteristics of that one person. And some people are like 10. Other people are like, they could go forever talking about their person. Now, once they've got their 10 characteristics of their person, I ask them to sort their list. 2 categories. IQ, things you have to be intelligent to be able to do, or EQ, emotional intelligence quotients, or I put decency quotient stuff in the EQ space just for ease for this. And then I ask them, what do they notice? 100% of the time, all of these leaders, and I've been doing this now 8 years as part of my own firm, have far more EQ items than IQ items. Sometimes they only have EQ items. And then my question is, what does it mean when you show up in ways that don't match the leadership characteristics you appreciate?
Yeah.
And what does it mean? It means you lack integrity. It means you are inauthentic. It means that should I trust you when what you say you value, you don't show up in that way? And now people are open. Because I'm not telling you empathy is important. You are telling you empathy is important because it's absolutely an emotional intelligence skill. Yeah. And if you think about who you've been willing to run through a wall for, it's not the person you think doesn't care about what you are going through or what you think, feel, and believe. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you've been doing this with corporations now for...
Yeah, 8 years this year.
8 years.
As part of my own firm. But when I left Hallmark, I worked for another woman who was doing the same thing for about 5 years. What?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So
sorry, I interrupted.
Oh, no, you're okay. Total 15 years, like outside of industry, but I was trying to do it inside of Hallmark too.
Okay.
Because I was specifically assigned to operations and IT. So these are more objective, reasonable, logical, critical questioning types of leaders. They're in technical professions. They're the people that HR says in the back room, they can't learn it, right? Like, they're an engineer, they just can't do it. But my sense was that these people are still married. They're still having kids. They're still humans. Therefore, if we can help them figure this out, we could help to repair their relationships, which could also make work better, right? I don't know. It's just kind of how I was thinking about it. Mm-hmm. And so what I did was just watch each course that was being taught in an HR space. And then I just translated it to language that would work for engineers. So that exercise that I just told you about, normally that is taught in an HR way of telling people, here's the definition of emotional intelligence. Here's the reasons why you should care about your people in this way. Engineers, doctors, lawyers think they're smarter than everybody else. You can't tell them anything. So I asked them to tell me, what are the leadership characteristics you appreciate? And now let's put those Post-it notes all up on the wall. Put the EQ ones over here, put the IQ ones over here. So now we're all looking at it. What do you notice? So can we all agree this is important and why we're here? Yes. Okay, good. Now they're willing to listen to me because I've helped reaffirm how smart they are.
Yeah. Good strategy.
Again, it's tactical empathy.
Yeah.
Understanding who you're talking to and adjusting your approach to be more effective.
I love it. What are some things you point out some things in the book that are helpful for expanding your empathy? Mm-hmm. And you mentioned some really practical things like reading a novel, or even like meeting people outside of your people group, like intentionally forcing yourself into uncomfortable situations outside your tribe, hanging out with the other, kind of a deal. Which
some people won't do right away, so I let them ease into it. This is evidence-based and proven. If you were well-read when you were a child, you probably will have more empathy, especially if you were reading fiction books about places and people who are not like yourself. It's kind of hard to read a book written by a person who's experienced their family being deported, as an example, and walk through a whole novel of all the traumas associated with that and come out of that book on the other end and go, ship them out of here. Like, it's just not likely to happen.
Right.
I was asked once, how did I manage to be Christian and also a friend to the LGBTQ community? And I was like, I don't know. But then when I thought about it, I had read fiction books written by gay authors and their experiences. I'd read James Baldwin. I'd read Maya Angelou talk about her experiences with her sexuality. And I didn't realize it, but how do those experiences not shape? Like, how are you not going to appreciate James Baldwin? Mm-hmm. How do you not appreciate Bayard Rustin? Like, how do you not appreciate these people? Mm-hmm. And you get to read those books. Those are nonfiction books, but how do you hear about the experiences they have being mistreated purely because of who they choose to love and not have your heart open? Mm-hmm. I don't know, but that is true for some people. They can still not care. But one of the 14 exercises that I give is to read fiction about a topic for which you lack empathy. and it is bound to build your empathy muscle. So that's one. I think when I consider having closed captions, how do I know how much trouble it is for someone when they don't speak whatever language it is their first language? Well, when you travel abroad, and you know how during the day everybody helping you speaks English, but at night nobody speaks English, and you're like, oh my God. A little subtitle on the Walmart signs is really helpful. And so it just changes how I view things, not because I'm a better person, but because I was doing these empathy exercises and not really realizing it. So in the back of the book, there's 14 days. You can do them over 14 months. It's not rigid. Nobody should be rigid about these kinds of things. But if you practice some of them, you'll notice that you'll start to gain more empathy over time. And so I basically did 4.5 years worth of research on specific empathy exercises that are known to build empathy in others. And these are the 14 that
Wow. It's worth the price of the book right there. Get it, folks. Get it.
Yeah. And it teaches you how to build empathy in other people. So if you're curious about how to help build empathy in your children or family members.
I love that. So I'm curious, in all the different corporations you worked with, you wouldn't need to name names, but do you have one that, like their culture was so anti-empathy and that you worked with and that you actually saw some major improvement? There one corporation in mind that you have that's was a standout? They really did change their culture over. And you talk about how it takes time to change culture, 2-3 year process. But then, and then I'm wondering if there's another one that you've worked with. It was just they didn't get it. They failed miserably.
Well, let me tell you, I can tell you the ones who tend to fail. They call me because they have a problem. So they've got a lawsuit or threatening union walkout, and they want to do a class to have everybody get it once, and then that's it. But if you've tried to do any personal change, stop smoking, better relationship with your in-laws, any personal change, if you do it this way in a classroom, it takes a while, right? I can read Mark Brackett's work and I can be like, oh, this is wonderful. But to actually do the things he's teaching me over time, that's going to take a while. But nothing like finding out your dad's not your dad. I say, God specializes in the fast track business. If you need to learn it fast, God will help you. You know what I mean? If you...
Even if it's a severe mercy, right?
Listen to what I'm trying to tell you. And so I try to get people to recognize that it's not really patience I want you to have, because patience, you're kind of thinking about eventually you're gonna get this, and then at that point I expect you to be better. I think it's just recognizing this process to change human behavior takes a while. So just plan for 3 years. And one of my clients, their average tenure was 22 years or something. If you started 3 years ago, we'd be in a good spot right now, right? People are not leaving, they're just staying. So let's just kind of do this. So I want to talk about the best case, and I'm going to try to change the industry to protect both the guilty and the ones who are doing well. Good job. I'll just say when the people who are inside organizations tend to struggle with poverty for whatever reason, interestingly enough, the leaders are not as empathetic as you think they should be. They tend to be rule followers who demand discipline. Because
people who are running teams of people with a large percentage of people who are under the poverty level.
Yes.
And then they tend to be kind of more like taskmaster type people.
Yes. Miss 3 days, you're on a performance improvement plan. You're on a performance improvement plan for 3 months. Now you're out of here. In your first 90 days, if you have anything that comes up, you're fired. Those, they tend to be just really rigid about the rules. I think they believe that, I don't know this for sure, but I think they believe that discipline is the way to help people kind of get out of that. And I think there are many reasons why people end up being poor that are not necessarily related to discipline. So these people were willing, though. They were willing. And they were bought in that the first thing we were going to do was do a moratorium on terminations. You can't fire anybody. If you're going to fire somebody, you got to call me. And I remember the first call I got, it was somebody stealing money from the company. That's how they said it. But the longer I listened, what happened was somebody had lied on a timesheet. Still stealing, but I mean, come on, hyperbole much, right? You act like they took money out of a drawer, which is non-negotiable. But the person said that they worked 40 hours the previous week and their work product didn't match. So what we landed on with this particular manager was, what if you had a conversation? What if you said, hey, I noticed that your work hours for last week don't match your work product. Here's what I propose, that you only get paid for the hours you worked last week. And I want your commitment that you are only going to put in the hours you worked from here going forward. Well, if you had that conversation, what do you think might happen? How do you think that person might respond?
I'm guessing if they want the job, they'll
probably make that adjustment. Whereas the only solution he saw before was firing. But I think what people don't realize when they try to fire their way to success is that the people who are left are just thinking, when's my turn coming? Like at some point I'm gonna be the next one on this.
There's some toxic stuff floating around in the culture.
Yeah. And so we started with one of my 7 strategies, which I've done this work with my colleague, Dr. Ian Roberts, and that is the power of 7 second chances. Now, people get all stuck on, what, you want to give somebody 14 chances? What I'm trying to do is to get them to stop counting.
I thought about Jesus, how many times do you forgive? 7 times.
Yeah, and it's like the number's so big. I just need you to stop counting. I need you to, your job as a leader is to recognize that everybody has a hole in their performance. You're not going to find one person who's just perfect. All of us have good things about us and things about us that need to be corrected. I certainly do. And so what does it look like if your job as a leader is to coach and develop and not necessarily to document and punish? So we spent a lot of time just trying to get leaders to get to that point that if you're still going to fire people, but by the time you need to fire somebody, I want them to be so ready to go. They know nobody's surprised. Everybody feels good, can sleep at night because I've done everything possible to build your capacity. Because that's your job as a leader. Right. And when you look at that, the characteristics of the person you said was amazing, that you like, they were people developers. And so what I thought was beautiful about this particular organization is that once we started working in that way, and there's some non-negotiables, like there's some things that you do just kind of let people go for. But you have to figure out what those are. And it's not a manual. It's like 3 things. It's not, something that's up on the shelf that I got to go see. Hey, did you violate the dress code policy 3 times and now you got to go kind of thing. But what was beautiful about them is that for cost, quality, service, every single metric they were better on at the end of 4.5 years because they had good people. That's what I was trying to help them see, that you have good people. You're giving more work to the high performers because you won't address and develop the low performers. The people in the middle, you don't ever even talk to them because they just come to work, get their work done, and just go away. And that group is highly influenceable. And I don't know, that's kind of straw and cap. And I do share specific data related to that organization in the book. Okay. And I do think we also say the name. I think so. Yeah. And you literally worked with them over a long period of time to where you actually saw the culture shift in the organization. And I was not working with the people. I was working with the leadership. Yeah. Leaders determine culture. And did you do it long enough for them to actually see how that then actually did impact their bottom line, if you want to call it that? They just recently won an award for something that they never would have won an award for at the beginning of this work. I remember a few times
doing this survey with my employees when I was, at a large church. And I can't remember who put it together, but it was best practices in a workplace kind of, and you have your employees fill it all out.
Yeah.
And then you get,
so like an engagement survey.
And then you get a score back.
Yeah. Was it Gallup?
No, it was a different one, but
White. There's one called White.
It would have been one that it would. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, but yeah, and it's fascinating to get that kind of feedback. It's a similar thing. Like when I was first introduced to emotional intelligence stuff, and we had the people that were working under me fill out a thing on
360.
me.
Yeah.
And then you're and you don't know who's saying it, right? So it gives people total safety. They don't have to worry about losing their job and all that kind of stuff. Those kind of things are so fascinating. And I imagine so many times over and over again, it falls right back to this empathy category, I bet.
The basics. It's, I used to wonder why Hallmark in operations used to demand that you would be a section manager. So you'd do shift work in the manufacturing plant, leading a team of 30. And I was just never understood why you needed to do that. And I think it's because every single leadership problem that has come up ever since, I saw it as a frontline section manager in a manufacturing plant. And if you think that people wake up in the morning telling themselves consciously, I want to do a bad job, this kind of thing ain't, it's not never going to work for you. But if you can buy into the idea that people want to contribute in a positive way, and if they could, they would love to work at a place where they were being rewarded and recognized and that they were making a contribution and they felt like their work mattered. It doesn't matter what the job is. So people think that there are these jobs that are glamorous and jobs that are not. But if you don't mind your job and you kind of like your boss, people will do lots of things for you. Gallup calls it discretionary effort, going above and beyond the call of duty. If somebody feels like you don't care anything about them, you're going to get exactly what's written on that paper and not a thing more.
Yeah.
Nothing more.
Yeah. People in the long run are more motivated by the relational side of things, and they're working with an environment that they enjoy versus the paycheck, right? The paycheck's short-term motivator. Yeah. These kinds of things are what builds a great organization over the long haul. If
I can have a good time and get the same pay, I'm going to a place where I can have, where I like the people and have a good time. And interestingly enough, it's hard to convince folk of that because I don't know if you know this, but power is at odds with empathy. So when you start to get more and more power, you lose your ability to connect with other people. And so simply getting a managerial role, if you're not working on it, you're very quickly going to forget what it was like to be. And you know how sometimes people say, well, you can't empathize with a situation you haven't had. The research is actually the opposite. If let's say, I did grow up in poverty and I made my way out. When I see someone else who's struggling with the same kinds of things I did, but they're not overcoming it like I did, I actually am more likely to have less empathy. Because I did it. Why can't you?
I see. Pull yourself up by your own bootstrap kind of
I did it.
Yeah.
And so...
I had to pay off my student loans.
That's right. I bought a house at 30.
So you do too.
It doesn't matter that, the world has changed drastically since you paid off your student loans, and now student loans are owned by privatized lenders and all these other things. But we can go there. Right. But I think that was the thing that was most shocking to me. People think this is another myth that you either are born with empathy or you're not. There's a really small segment of the population that's born with empathy. The rest of us learned it in some capacity, some way. 20% is what is about the number that have been thrown around based on all these different personality assessments. Right. But the rest of us have learned empathy either through experience or someone taught it to us. And so it's interesting to to see people go, well, either you have empathy or you
Right.
don't. If you think that, then you don't think you can build it. You can't teach it to your leaders. So when they don't have it, what do? You fire them, or worse, if they're really good at what they do, you just let them just be horrible to people.
And I think one of the things you see when the culture's bad is that the turnover ratio
It's high.
is high. And what's interesting is when you're onboarding people, it takes months for people to be effective, right? And then if you've got this turnover thing, you're never getting
effective.
So the bad culture just keeps perpetuating through this high turnover ratio, right?
And what I love is when people are in call centers or retail environments, schools, places where turnover is naturally a little higher. And they'll use the fact that in their industry, turnover is higher as the justification for their turnover. But even in those industries, when you find an empathetic leader, you find a person who keeps their people longer.
Longer than the averages at least, right?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
And even still, when people leave that department, they don't leave the organization. They just go do something else. But then they're more likely, though, to keep their people longer, which that's what I keep asking. What do you think it costs you to have to get someone else up to speed every time? They don't understand your business, even if they're much better at performance, because you're going to lose something. And I don't know. I feel like I'm convincing some people. I haven't been able to convince enough people.
Yeah. Well, I love your work. I need to honor your time here, Nicole, because we've run out of time.
Okay.
But how do people connect with you? Obviously, they can go to Amazon and get the book, Spark the Heart.
Or Barnes & Noble. Or if they're ordering large quantities, Porchlight is where you get the best deal.
Okay.
But drnicoleprice.com is where you can take the empathy assessment for free. That's where you can join our community if you want to know more about what I'm doing. Every August, I do the Empathy 14. So for 14 days, I go through all the same exercises that I ask other people to do. It sounds like it's a lot, but it's absolutely not like the Daniel Fast or anything. The first 7 days are just thinking. It's just the lens through which you're thinking during that week. And then the second week has 7 days worth of specific little exercises that you do. And you assess and see how you're doing in terms of empathy at the end of it.
All right. Well, cool. Thank you so much for being on Spirituality Adventures. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in this episode. And we will see you next time. Hey, you made it to the end. Thanks for listening all the way through on this episode. By the way, if you're not already a supporter, go to spiritualityadventures.com, sign up for one of our monthly supports, and you will receive our bonus content. You'll receive lots of interesting information about our guests. Many of our musicians will do special bonus songs and record a song. So I want to encourage you to do that. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe. Be sure and share any of the episodes that you like. And be sure and make comments if you like them as well. This helps us get Spirituality Adventures out there to more listeners, more watchers. So whatever platform you're using, subscribe, like, share, make comments, and go to our website, sign up for our team, and be a part of the team support. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.